In September of 2015, Volkswagen shocked the world by admitting to installing a device on their vehicles that allowed them to cheat emissions tests in the US. This scandal, now often referred to as Dieselgate, is one of the biggest examples of fraud in corporate history. The scandal has cost the company over $33 billion to date and directly affects many individuals in the US who drive these cars. I've followed this scandal for the past 4 years, as I'm sure many of you have, and in this speech, I am going to explain the events surrounding the emissions scandal, who it affects, and the fallout that the company has had to deal with. This speech is divided into three parts: the events leading up to and the breaking of the scandal, the initial public reaction and media response, and finally, Volkswagen's actions and the continued fallout from the scandal in the past several years. So, what caused this to happen? Well, according to statements later made by the company, the scandal had been in the making for a long time. The origin of the problem started in the mid-2000s when Volkswagen started pushing for a new line of diesel vehicles to be sold in the US. They tasked a group of engineers to design these vehicles to pass emissions tests. This was somewhat of a problem because emissions tests in the US are much more stringent than those in Europe. Apparently, the engineers felt significant pressure from above and were not given significant money to complete this task, so they resorted to installing a defeat device. This device sensed when the car was being tested for emissions and lowered the emissions to the appropriate level. However, when the car was driving on the highway, it would emit up to 40 times more than the emission test results said. So, this scandal went on for several years without anyone knowing. It wasn't until 2015 when West Virginia University researchers discovered that several Volkswagen models had higher in-use emissions than the test showed. At this point, Volkswagen denied any wrongdoing and blamed several technical difficulties and test conditions. However, later, when the California Air Resources Board retested the vehicles, they saw very little improvement. Volkswagen again blamed test conditions and several other technical difficulties. It wasn't until the EPA refused to certify Volkswagen's diesel lineup in September of 2015 that they admitted to installing the defeat device on their vehicles. Needless to say, after the scandal broke, the auto manufacturer was subject to a lot of negative media and public outrage. As far as media coverage of the crisis goes, as we know, it was pretty heavy on negative ads. There was also a lot of speculation on what the scandal would mean for the company and its shareholders. Many people thought that the company was going to go under, and there was large speculation in the media on how much the company was going to have to pay out, or the effect on Volkswagen owners living in the US. If we look at public reaction, investors were probably the most outraged by this because they believed that the company had not acted in their best interest. Needless to say, the stock of the company took a severe hit after the scandal broke, dropping almost 33% in the following days. Investors also argued that Volkswagen should have told them about the scandal rather than them having to hear from it from regulators. They are filing a $10.7 billion suit against the company for this reason. When it comes to the general public, there was a lot of outrage over how much energy Volkswagen had put into its Clean Diesel campaign. This campaign touted diesel energy as cleaner than gas and on par with electric and hybrid vehicles. So there was a lot of outrage when it turned out they were emitting up to 40 times more than they said. There was a lot of varied speculation on social media and varied comments. If we look at this graph from Harvard Business Review, it breaks down the tweets posted on Twitter into negative, neutral, and positive remarks. As we can see, in the month following the crisis in September, the majority of the tweets are negative. However, as time progresses, they slowly become more neutral and positive, with a large upturn in negative tweets in January of 2016. This was when the US Department of Justice filed a complaint against Volkswagen for the 600,000 cars sold in the US installed with these defeat devices. So finally, let's look at Volkswagen's response and the continued fallout that they've had to face from this crisis. So as far as Volkswagen's response to the crisis goes, immediately following the breaking of the news, both the CEO of Volkswagen in Germany and the child company Volkswagen America issued a formal apology where they specifically apologized for breaking investors' trust and promised an investigation into the matter. This was followed shortly by the resignation of the then CEO, Martin Winterkorn. He was replaced by Matthias Müller, who was the former CEO of Porsche at the time. The new CEO made significant efforts to appease customers, offering them gift baskets, refund, and money to cover fixing the vehicles by removing the defeat device. If we look at the response to the company, it was fairly good in that they did try to make an effort to fix their wrongdoing. However, they continue to not deny involvement of anyone past the small group of engineers that came up with the idea. However, it has been clear at this point that there were many more involved, as higher level executives have admitted to involvement. However, the problem is America does not have an extradition treaty with Germany, so the German citizens cannot be tried in America for taking part in the fraud because they are German citizens. So if we look at the fallout of this in the past years, according to a recent article by the Wall Street Journal, costs to Volkswagen relating to the scandal have now exceeded $33 billion. This includes a $14.7 billion settlement to get 85% of the affected vehicles off the road in America, a $4.3 billion settlement in civil penalties, and $2.8 billion in fines for the Volkswagen subsidiary Audi. There are also numerous other smaller costs affecting Volkswagen and its subsidiaries. At this point, it looks like the majority of the costs are paid off. However, there is still some expected from additional lawsuits from individuals and even foreign governments. This graph shows the breakdown of cost to Volkswagen related to the crisis over the past 4 years. As you can see, the biggest hit was in 2015 when it leaked, and it's slowly decreased over the past few years, but even this past year, they still paid $1 million related to the crisis, and it is not totally over at this point. So if we look at the stock price for Volkswagen, we can see that there was a clear drop in the stock when the crisis leaked in 2015. It dropped by about a third and has been pretty volatile since then with a slight increase over the years. There's a lot of speculation on whether it is a good buy at this point or if people should consider investing in it. We do think that they've paid most of their related liabilities. However, there is still more potential, so it's hard to know what they are going to do at this point. So, in conclusion, it does look like Volkswagen is going to survive the crisis. This is mainly due to the size of the organization. However, they will continue to face massive penalties and litigation fees. The way in which the company did deal with the crisis helped them survive. However, their ongoing denials and attempts to protect upper management will forever taint public perception of the company.